I'm Clarke Speaks, the catastrophic injury lawyer. Welcome to The Verdict. This is 5 Failures from Success.
Hey, welcome back. My name's Carson Grace Toomer, and I'm here with American injury lawyer Clarke Speaks. Now, Mr. Speaks, previously we talked about your, maybe quote-unquote first failure that you've pulled out from your life that you felt, led to a positive outlook on your own life. What would be the second one?
The second one was I was a fat kid, and so I was a crazy fat, but I was fat, like everybody else. It seemed like growing up was, ripped and athletic and all this, and I was a chunky kid, went out from like, how when you go to public school or school of any sort, you're, from the time you're in first grade to the time you're, finishing up middle school, a lot of what you're learning is to sit and be still and not move around. So I was a chunky kid growing up, and that sort of really impacts, it's not something you would know unless you were a chunky kid, but so what it does is it impacts your self-esteem, it impacts your life in a lot of ways, and you think, and it drives your thoughts and behaviors and all this for a long period of time. So at some point in time, you feel like, you're left out. Maybe you're picked last for a team. Maybe you're, I remember being in, but you don't know you're fat, right? So you show up to school and you got your headband on and you're ready to go. And I would literally never forget. I played a lot of sports when I was a kid, so I remember, for example, I'm on this. They didn't have a lot of youth league stuff when I was a kid, but they had some stuff. And I played basketball with my buddies, and so it was okay. I wasn't great by any means, but I was okay. And so we play at church league basketball, and so this was back in the '80s, and they were not interested in participation trophies or any of that kind of stuff. If you weren't good, you just didn't play. So they put me in at the very end of the game, right? And I'm there in my tight little uniform and all, and I'm like, these people don't respect who I am as a basketball player, and I'm going to fix that, right? So the kid, who's the captain or whatever, accidentally passes me the ball, and I'm like, I'm going to show him what's up. So I dribble and all over the place, and I'm just showing off my dribbling skills. And I hear them saying something, and I'm like, what are they saying? And they're like, pass the ball. And so I'm thinking, you guys are just still not seeing my skills that I am on display for everybody. So let me show you this. Anyway, then the whistle blows, the game's over, and they were saying, pass the ball because we're down by 1 point. We need a basket, and we don't need you running around the court. But so that's an example of how, being a chunky kid affected, my experience. And then I was worse, right? Then I'm like, now I'm the chunky kid that doesn't know how to play basketball and doesn't understand the game, that you got to get more points than the other team and all this. And so anyway, and then I remember other occasions where I would be like, I would see. I remember being in probably the 4th grade, and I delivered newspapers, right? And one of the girls on my route was also in the 4th grade, and I thought she was beautiful, and she was beautiful for the 4th grader, and I would go to deliver the newspapers, and I would, for her, I'd kind of check my look in the mirror before I got up to the door, and kind of be like, here's your newspaper, and she could not have been less interested, and partially because she's in 4th grade, for crying out loud, but also probably because, I was a chuggy kid. At some point in time, she was in my class, and at some point in time, I, let it be known, hey, what's up? And I remember she was so like, in her, I could see in her face that she was like, that is not even not a possibility, that she had her friend, very abruptly tell me that was not a possibility. Which the funny thing is, her friend was bigger than I was. So, but her friend very directly informed me that that was not on the table. You know, that that was not in our collective future. And so, those kinds of experiences were, you know, negative, challenging, and I felt like a failure. Right? I felt like I was, and also, by the way, you know, my dad was super athletic. My brother was and is to this day a very, very athletic person, and was strong and fit, and just ripped. You know, he was, you know, best figure in high school, and uh, was on the Carolina track team at UNC, and he was a tremendous athlete. And so it just sort of impacted my perception of myself. And you see photos of yourself and you're like, oh gosh, you know, can I get to the back of the group or whatever? And so so that was a challenge, and uh, that was a failure, right? Because that's directly something I'm doing, right? I am not doing the things that I should do uh, in order to be fit and healthy.
How did your experience kind of impact your interactions with your peers, and then more so, you know, following that, your self-esteem? And it seems like it was kind of this snowball effect that, you know, you interact with your peers and it lowers your self-esteem, and then your self-esteem is lowered, so that alters, you know, your interactions with your peers. Am I right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you know, so I did have some friends who were also chunky, which is funny, but and they would be amused to hear. One of them I talked to this morning on the way in. Two of them, I'm sorry, I talked to this morning on the way in. Uh, a lot of my friends to this day are people I've known since I was 6 years old. So yeah, so those it does impact your self-esteem. It impacts your relationship. It impacts your, I'll never forget. I remember being in probably fifth grade, and there was a kid that was sitting behind me. And when in the '80s, there was Levi's, right? Levi's were a big deal, and this was something that only a heavy kid would recognize. But they would print your waist size and length of your pants on the back of your pants, which I thought was like the cruelest joke that anybody has ever come up with in the history of the world. But somehow they thought that was a good idea to put. And I remember this kid was behind me, and he was like, 36, 30. And he was like, wait a minute. He just couldn't get his head around. He was like, hey man, your waist is bigger than your length of your pants. And I'm like, yeah, I got it, thanks. And he's like, no, you're not. It's your waist, the length of the distance, the circumference of your, And I'm like, bro, I got it. I hear what you're saying. He could not get his head around the concept of somebody having a waist that was bigger than their, because he was like a little thin guy and all this. So the whole thing was just it just defines so much of your self-perception of who you are, of what your abilities are, of what your capabilities are. And in your mind, you see yourself as this person who, everybody's telling you, you can do anything, you can be anything, you can do anything you want to do. And it's true that you can do anything you want to do. But then you see this sort of, and then it becomes sort of a cyclical thing where you're like, you want to do these things, you see yourself doing these things, but then you're frustrated by your own decisions because you're the one that's making this world. And I don't know that it's any different if it's like if there's other artificial limitations that you put on yourself, maybe substance abuse or alcoholism or, drug addiction or phone addiction or whatever these kinds of things are. They sort of self-perpetuate to some extent, according to somebody who's had a drug problem could give you more information about that than I. But I do think that it has a lot of commonality.
How did this experience kind of, impact not only your outlook on your life as a whole, but also your lifestyle going forward?
Well, so it was such a defining part of my youth and my experience as a kid that at some point I decided, hey, you get to that point where you're like, all right, I'm done with this. And so I remember sixth grade. So I was the same weight in the sixth, seventh, eighth, and maybe not. No, yeah, sixth, seventh, eighth, and maybe ninth grade, and went substantially taller. And so at that point in time, I had kind of made a commitment. You know, my brother, who was a fitness guy and was very athletic, had sort of, you know, helped me figure out some things to do. Like he was in a gym. Guys in my town had a gym. It was kind of an old school gym, right? So there was a lot of, you know, just kind of tough guys there and stuff. And I remember being there, and my brother was in a weightlifting contest there, and I'm over on, and he was training for that with this group of guys who were older and you know, more seasoned. And I remember I was sort of in the corner riding a stationary bike, right? And he might have been, I forget, maybe I was in the sixth grade or something. And this is kind of at the beginning of my sort of transition into something else. And I'm riding the bike, and he's working out. And then they come back, and somebody notices, hey, you've been riding the bike for like 30 minutes, you know? And so they start making a big deal out of it. It's a big deal. It's right. You're riding a bike. But the guys there start making a big deal out of it. These older guys and my brother are trying to make a big deal out of it. And they're like, hey, man, nobody's ever ridden the bike for like an hour before. And so I'm like, you know, riding the bike or whatever. I don't know that was real, but that was on the wall as being a record for some period of time, you know. And it was really just to sort of, you know, help me. That was their effort to help me sort of feel good about something that I had accomplished, because they had to see me sitting there watching my brother do all these crazy, great things, you know. And so they sort of felt this. And so, but what it did is it gave me some kind of confidence and go, okay, now I've started, right? And so then I say, what else can I do? So I play sports in high school. They didn't have really the same development, the same degree of youth sports that they have now. So I played sports in high school, and I played football, and and when you know, that was a difficult thing because I wasn't in great shape when I started, and I played with some phenomenal kids that were just really good and talented, and some coaches that were just awesome. And but what it did do is it forced you to kind of catch up, and so by doing that, and this is all as because I was like trying to get away from this, you know, chubby kid, right? And so it, you know, forced me to get out of my comfort zone, to say, hey, if I want to do something different, I gotta, if I want to be something different, I got to do something different. And so it forced me to go do these things, and I did do the things. And at first, it was, you know, scary. I was played with some really good people who were tough and strong and bigger and all this. And then, but over time, it taught me how to follow on a team and be on a team. It taught me all the lessons of youth sports: how to lead, how to sacrifice, how to be disciplined. I mean, you play college sports. I mean, you know all the benefits that you get from participating in sports at whatever level. You know, I don't think it has to be at a you know, a college level for you to get the same benefit of a team. And so it really I got a chance to be around people and to see people and to learn all these valuable life lessons that if I hadn't had this commitment in my head, hey, I've got to behave differently in order to be different. And so that was an important part of the process for me and then because I was involved in youth sports, fitness and athletic training and those kinds of things became an important part of what you did, right? In the off season, you got to maintain your fitness. So what I just did was I said, okay, well, in order to stay in shape for football, I'm going to wrestle. And then that opened me up to a whole new world and so I wrestled in high school. And now I wasn't good, you know, but I wrestled with some people who were really good. Like there were some kids on my team that were phenomenal, and some coaches that I had, Coach Mann and Coach Paul and these other guys that were just really good, and they were dedicated. Even if it was a small town, small school, they were accomplished, and they took their positions seriously, and they taught us life lessons that I think are valuable to this day. And then you know, I mean, I can remember wrestling at one point in time. Just one quick anecdote. We're sitting all in the bleachers. Or the wrestling team is sitting in the bleachers, and one of this kid that's good. Guy's name is Dan McCormick. He was a good wrestler. Dan McCormick, Travis Day, Robert Reynolds. All these guys were really good, good wrestlers. Frank Eastman, um, Mike Sinclair. So these are good wrestlers, and they're sitting on the bleachers, and Dan goes, "Hey, who's wrestling Martin?" This is Kid Martin, and the coach kind of looks at him like, and he's like, "No, I just want to know who's wrestling Martin." And the coach is like, and I'm like, "What's going on here?" And then about that time, I hear the other team's coming in, and I hear sort of a jingling. It sounds like Santa Claus, right? And I'm like, trying to do the math on that, and then I see the team coming in, and there's one kid that has medals from here all the way down, and then the kid who said who's wrestling Martin kind of looks around like laughing as if his point were proven. Anyway, so this kid is Martin, and he is a phenomenal wrestler from a rival school, and he is in my weight class, and so I'm going to be wrestling Martin, and I remember at weigh-in, he looked like a professional athlete, and I did not, and so I was like, oh, this is going to be tough. So my wrestling coach he'd come from a real big program, so he was really into it, and people would come to our wrestling matches, and so they would dim all the lights, right? So the lights in the gym are completely out, it's dark, and there's a spotlight right in the center of the mat, and so it's a kind of a dramatic, setup. So I'm get out there and I'm going to wrestle this guy, and if truth be told, I was afraid. And we start, the match, and anyway, we wrestle, and he is every bit as good as they suggested he would be, But I make it much farther into the match than I thought, and I was almost pinned within seconds of this thing starting. So the whole time I'm like fighting off my back. Goes through the first period, goes through the second period, gets almost through the third period, and the ref calls it. He's like, yeah, he indicates that the match is over, and I'm like, no way, he didn't pin me. I was furious. I was like, no way. I wasn't disrespectful of the coach or the referee, but I was like, he did not pin. And then the coach had to come and explain to me how it wasn't that you were pinned, it was a technical superiority. He got so far ahead of you that we called it, But I mean, even coming through that loss, and it was it's a public loss, but it gave me confidence going, that's one of the best guys. I mean, this is easily one of the best wrestlers in the state. I mean, not just for my weight class, for any weight class. He might be one of the best wrestlers in the Southeast. And I was on the mat with him, and I did my best, and I felt like I had a respectable showing. So that's another thing that so these experiences that you have as a result of something that might have been negative, right? You're a chunky kid or whatever. That ends up being a source for me and also that experience gave me credibility with my teammates. That experience gave me credibility with my coach. Treated me differently after that because he saw how hard I worked and how hard I tried, and he saw heart and courage that he might not have known was there. And so that's one of the ways that this thing that I thought was a curse, and it told me, it told me, hey, you've got a gear, and we all do, right? This is not just me personally. It's you've got a gear in there that you didn't know you had, that you might not, you might not win, necessarily every match, but you can compete, And I use that in my life today. That's those same experiences, because life can be hard. There can be challenges professionally, personally, family, spiritually, emotionally. And if you have been through those kinds of challenges, and then you can take those lessons, you can take those experiences, that confidence, and say, hey, if I can make it through that, I can make it through this. I'll tell you an example of how it affected my early in my career. I used to do a lot of criminal defense in addition to personal injury, and so I had this one case in particular. That was the guy was being charged with some very, very serious offenses. There was a witness that was available on the other side of the state, but he was in jail. He would have been helpful to my client. So there's two ways you can approach this. One way is to go, hey, I'm sorry, he's in jail. I can't get him here. The trial's going on. Judge is not going to move this date. We're trying this case. The other way is to figure something out. So I tried to figure something out. There was no figuring it out. He wasn't going to, the trial started and he was still in jail, and I could not get him there under the circumstances. I could not subpoena him there. So the trial goes, he gets out on day like 3 of this trial. And I'm in communication the whole time with the jail. And I calculate that if the trial gets out at 5, I can go to the other side of the state, get him, come back, take a shower, be back at the courthouse in time for the trial to commence at 9 o'clock the next day. Most people probably wouldn't have done that. They would have said, but but I think it's because I have been through these sort of challenges. A lot of them were, physical and athletic in nature. I'm like, I think back to this situation when I was wrestling, and I'm like, I'm not going to not do this thing just because it's hard. So the trial ends on, Wednesday at 5 or whatever. The judge gives me permission. I run out of the courtroom. I go to my car. I've got my bag packed. I go, and I start, and I'm like 3 hours outside of town. I get a call that the jailer, the head jailer of the county where I was going to get this guy, had called us and said, hey, he heard about what you're doing, and he's made arrangements to send the guy through. You don't have to do that. He's made arrangements to send the guy. They're going to transport. So they transported my guy to the courthouse where I was trying the case for the purposes of him being and he was a witness, and it worked out, and all this, But that's something that I might not have ever done, that going that, extra mile and not being boxed in by my perception of what the limitations were, because of experiences like that. And so I think that, again, that's why this thing that I thought was such a curse. And then there's another thing about it too, which is because of the things that I did, and that sort of commitment to fitness during that period of time, it carried over. So I've worked out pretty consistently since I was 12 or 13 years old. There was a period of time in college where I kind of, took some time off and didn't do much and all that. But other than that little stretch, I've worked out consistently for 40 years, And the reason that's been important for me is because no, weight's always been a struggle for me. So my weight goes up. I mean, you can look at videos from the podcast a year ago, and I was 25 pounds heavier than I am now. So that's always been, and that may be something I always struggle with. But at least I know that I can do the things that I need to do to address it, And it's been a huge benefit for me because it has increased the longevity and the quality of my life. My family, some of us have heart disease, cardiovascular issues. And in fact, I had 2 stents put in 3 or 4 months ago, cardiovascular issues. And But if I hadn't, done all the physical things that I have done to try to address this fitness issue, this weight issue, you know, then if I didn't have that issue that compelled me to work out all the time, to exercise all the time, to train all the time, and to be careful about what I'm eating, I probably would have, my cardiovascular issues would have progressed much further. And you think that cardiovascular issues are weight. You think it's heavy people are the ones that have, that's not true. I just got finished with cardiac rehab, and it was people of all different weights, right? People of all different weights were in cardio rehab. And so if I would have been thin as a kid, I might not have never done these things and spent the last 30, 40 years working out and training and exercising, so that my cardiovascular issues would have been so much more progressed. My grandfather, who was not heavy at all, died at 62 of a heart attack, So this is another example of how something that I thought was terrible, it was a curse, it was like, why me, I mean, it's kind of silly because it's completely within your control, but that's how I was looking at it. It has ended up being a blessing because it has caused me to take the steps, to have opportunities, to have relationships, to have experiences, to derive confidence, to have to learn things and to do things that are going to extend the duration and quality of my life.
If you could sum up maybe one or two big life lessons that you learned from this experience, what would those be?
I would say, I think it goes back to the original premise that something that's going on in your life that you think is negative may not actually be negative. It may be something positive. It depends on how you look at it and what you do about it, and how you approach it going forward. It can be a platform for failure, an excuse for failure, or a platform for success. I tell my kids that a lot. If something bad happens, if you don't get into the school that you want, I mean, kids think about that today. Like, if you don't get into the school you want, you think, oh, my life is over. No, it's not. That's ridiculous. It's just, or if you, I talked to a young person yesterday that got arrested for something, and they think, oh, my life is over. No, it's not. It's not over. It's not insurmountable. If you're dead, then it's over. If you're not, there's an opportunity for you, something good to come out of it. So that's the biggest life lesson that I can think of that comes from this whole situation. The other thing is to draw support from the different places that you might have it available. Maybe it's from a podcast. Maybe it's from a friend, a teacher, a coach, a parent. It could be from a child. But, we can draw, for me, it's always been lots of people. It's been from my family, from my mom, my brother, it's been from my friends. It's been from, coaches and coworkers and colleagues and, sometimes adversaries, So I think drawing lessons and examples and experiences from yourself and from what you see in other people is a critical component to success.
All right, well, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us to stay up to date with our weekly episodes. We'll see you next time.